it was decided, okay, it's going to be a large project, it's going to be done by the Port Authority, it's going to be concerned with world trade. So far, so good. The original plan was to put it on the east side of Lower Manhattan. Bear in mind that the Port Authority is a bi-state agency. So understandably, the governor of New Jersey was concerned. He said, well, you're building this World Trade Center for New York. What are you going to do for us?
The Port Authority agreed to take over New Jersey's bankrupt Hudson and Manhattan Commuter Railroad, now known as PATH for Port Authority Trans-Hudson. The railroad had been running since 1908 and was in dire need of a facelift. Its terminus was on the west side of Lower Manhattan.
Once this deal was in place, that New Jersey was getting the PATH, New York was getting the Trade Center, gradually it hit everyone. Why not put it on the west side, and then you could do two projects at once? It was a brilliant breakthrough, and the governor of New Jersey said, at least we can see the damn thing.
The World Trade Center project was moved from the east side to the middle of a neighborhood known as Radio Row.
This was the center of the radio industry, where I remember going down there as a child with my father to buy radio tubes.
It was a sort of a bazaar of retailers, mostly involving consumer electronics of some kind. And this was where the first TVs were sold off the shelves in the United States. I mean, this was the consumer appliance mecca.
Radio Row merchants protested, but their shops would vanish by way of the wrecking ball as plans to build the biggest complex in Lower Manhattan geared up.
Ultimately, they didn't have much of an argument when you compared what, in the minds of the various judges who heard the cases, was the public good. Well, I mean, you're just a business. You can go and you can move someplace else. But this is Lower Manhattan, and the financial district has to expand. I mean, look, you guys got to get out of the way.
The merchants were bought out. Planners decided the World Trade Center site would occupy 16 acres, but it was not yet known who would design it.
When Yama received the letter, we looked at the letter, and Yama kind of called us together and said, you know, it just shows how careful you got to be when you write a letter of invitation like this, because here's a project that obviously has a misplaced decimal point. It's got too many zeros. Who would be asking our firm to do a project of $250 million? But we prevailed upon Yama to follow through and make a call.
It was the call that changed his life. Out of a field of more than a dozen prominent architects, Austin Tobin and the Port Authority chose Minoru Yamasaki and his firm out of Michigan to design one of the most important buildings in the world. The year was 1962.
Yamasaki was a rather strange choice as an architect because he had never built anything on this scale before, and most of his previous buildings had been rather precious boxes, buildings that were detailed and ornamented in a way that you wouldn't expect to relate to the size of the World Trade Center. He was also famously a strange pick because he had fear of heights.
What impressed the Port Authority was Yamasaki's grasp of engineering and his character. He was a self-made man, rising from a hard-scrabble childhood in Seattle to acclaim as an award-winning architect.
They saw someone who was similar in some ways to them and to their values. This was not an architectural prima donna.
Yamasaki and his team went to work studying and designing over 100 different schemes and models.
There were times when something would just simply go wrong. Yama would look at it and would see the flaws in it quickly and very compassionately say, let's try a little something else.
Yamasaki finally settled on a two-tower development between 80 and 90 stories tall. Its plaza was evocative of the Piazza San Marco in Venice. Light poured into interior public areas, and windows were designed shoulder width to give people a sense of security, no matter how high the floor. But the Port Authority wanted to make one important change.
Given the square footage demands of the World Trade Center project, the Public Relations Department began to say, well, why not make it the tallest building in the world?
He was very, very nervous about that because of the cost of pushing those extra floors in. He was fearful that the economics of the project would dictate to stripping away some of the things at the ground level for the planting in the plaza, the flowers in the plaza, the sculpture in the plaza, and even in the lobbies, the amount of marble that's in the lobbies, the stainless steel doors, all of these things that he was so fond of.
The budget was increased. Little, if anything, would be scaled back. And the famous 1,250-foot Empire State Building, the tallest building in the world since 1931, was about to be eclipsed by the new 1,360-foot towers of the World Trade Center.